Welcome to Warhammer 40k 8th edition battle report number 6. Let's start by taking a quick look at the board that the armies will be playing on today. This is what the terrain will look like for the battle. In this corner, we have Objective Marker 5, Objective Marker 3, and Objective Marker 6 over here in this corner. On the opposite side, we have Objective Marker 1, Objective Marker 4 in the middle, and Objective Marker 2 in this corner. First things first, we need to roll for which deployment map the armies will be using today. Here's the roll, getting a 1, which is Spearhead Assault. This map right here. On a 1, 2, or 3, the Chaos Demons of Khorne will begin deploying on the near side of the map, and the Death Guard will deploy on the far side. On a 4, 5, or 6, it will be the opposite, with the Death Guard deploying on the close end and the Chaos Demons of Khorne deploying on the far end. And here's the roll for that. So the Chaos Demons of Khorne will deploy right here on this near side, and the Death Guard will deploy over there at the far end of the table. On a 1, 2, or 3, the Chaos Demons of Khorne will begin deploying first. On a 4, 5, or 6, the Death Guard will begin deploying first. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne will begin deploying first, so we will be back after the deployment. Taking a quick look at where the armies finished deploying, the Chaos Demons of Khorne began to deploy first, but the Death Guard finished deploying first, so they will go first unless the Chaos Demons of Khorne seize the initiative. Taking a look at where the units ended up, we have the unit of Flesh Hounds, one of the Skull Cannons, squad of Bloodletters, Demon Prince of Khorne, both Bloodthirsters, second squad of Bloodletters, Scarbrand, the other squad of Bloodletters, and the final 2 Skull Cannons. On the Death Guard side, we have a squad of Nurgling Swarms, the Chaos Land Raider, with the Plague Marines, Malignant Plaguecaster, Tallyman, and Plague Surgeon all embarked inside, Demon Prince of Nurgle, Mortarion, Demon Prince of Nurgle, Plagueburst Crawler, and the final squad of Nurgling Swarms. Because this is the Spearhead deployment map, the deployment zones go from 12 inches on the side up to 27 inches in the middle, and then back to 12 inches. Same over on the Death Guard side. So these 2 points, which is the closest for the deployment zones between the 2 armies, is only 18 inches away from each other, whereas the edges of the deployment zones are 48 inches away from each other. So now we roll to see if the Chaos Demons of Khorne seize the initiative from the Death Guard, and here's the roll, and they fail to seize. So we will move into Death Guard turn 1. Going into Death Guard turn 1, a reminder that the Death Guard have all 6 of their starting command points, and the Chaos Demons of Khorne have all 7 of their starting command points. Since this is the chapter-approved Maelstrom of War mission Kill Confirmed, the Death Guard will begin their turn by drawing 3 tactical objective cards. The first is Defend Objective 3, score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 3 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. Objective Marker 3 is this one right here, in the middle of the board, currently not being held by anyone. The second tactical objective card the Death Guard drew is Psychological Warfare. Score 1 victory point if your opponent failed a morale test during this turn. If your opponent failed 3 or more morale tests, score D3 victory points instead. And the third tactical objective card is Overwhelming Firepower. Score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during the shooting phase of your turn. If 3 or more enemy units were destroyed during the shooting phase of your turn, score D3 victory points instead. Going into the Death Guard movement phase, we will start with Mortarion moving 12 inches up the board towards the Chaos Demons of Khorne. And Mortarion will finish his movement right here. Next, this Chaos Demon of Nurgle with wings is going to move 12 inches up the board towards Objective Marker 4, and he will also declare an advance at the same time, and gets 1 inch. So after 13 inches of total movement between the advancing and his movement distance, he ends up right here, just over 3 inches away from the center of Objective Marker 4. This squad of Nurglings will remain still. This Plagueburst Crawler can move up to 9 inches, but is just going to move a few in order to reposition itself. And it will finish its movement here in order to get a better line of sight onto this darker orange Bloodthirster. This Demon Prince of Nurgle is going to move 12 inches up the board towards Objective Marker 3, and he will also declare an advance, and gets 4 inches. So after 16 inches of total movement, the Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings ends up well within 3 inches of objective marker 3. This Nurgling swarm is going to remain still. And finally, the Chaos Land Raider is going to move 10 inches up the board towards the Chaos Demons of Khorne. And the Chaos Land Raider will end its movement right here. Moving into the Psychic phase for Death Guard turn 1, we will begin with this Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings, who will cast Smite, and the closest visible enemy unit happens to be this Bloodthirster because the base is slightly closer than the Demon Prince and the Bloodletters. So needing a 5 or higher, and gets it with a 7. The Fleshhounds, with their Collar of Khorne, will attempt to deny the Witch. Getting an 11, and they deny it. Next, this Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings will attempt to cast Smite onto these Bloodletters, as they are the closest visible enemy unit. Needing a 5, and passes with a 7. Chaos Demons of Khorne have no more Deny the Witch abilities, so D3 mortal wounds, and gets 3. So 3 Bloodletters will go down. Next, Mortarion will cast Miasma of Pestilence onto himself, needing a 6, and gets it with an 8. So now, the Chaos Demons of Khorne must subtract 1 from all hit rolls that target Mortarion. Finally, Mortarion will attempt to cast Blades of Putrefaction onto himself, and he needs a 5, and gets it. Until the start of his next Psychic phase, add 1 to all wound rolls made by that unit in the fight phase. Furthermore, any wound roll of 7+ made for that unit in the fight phase with a melee plague weapon, i.e. a plague sword or any weapon with the plague weapon ability, inflict a mortal wound on the target in addition to any other damage. Going into the shooting phase, for Death Guard turn 1, the Death Guard will begin by using the stratagem Blasphemous Machines on the Plague Burst Crawler. It costs 1 command point, which will drop the Death Guard from 6 command points down to 5, and until the end of the phase, that vehicle can ignore the penalties for moving and firing heavy weapons, or for advancing and firing assault weapons. So the Plague Burst Crawler will now be able to shoot normally. And so with that, we will begin with the shooting attacks from the Plague Burst Crawler, and it will fire everything it has into this wounded Bloodletter squad. And we will start with the Heavy Slugger, which is 4 shots onto the Bloodletters. Hitting on 4s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds. 2 5-up invulnerable saves. Passes 1 and fails 1. So 1 more Bloodletter will go down. Now for the 2 Entropy Cannons. Hitting on 4s, getting 1 hit. Wounding on a 2, and fails to wound. And the Death Guard will use a command point to re-roll that. Going from 5 command points down to 4, and here's the re-roll. It still fails to wound. Only needed a 2. And now the D6 shots from the Plague Burst Mortar. Getting 5 shots. Hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, and both of those hit. So 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and 1 more goes down. Mortarion will shoot the Lantern into this Bloodthirster. Hitting on a 2, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. Finally, in the shooting phase, this Chaos Land Raider will shoot everything it has, including the Combi Bolter at full range, into this Bloodthirster. Starting with the Combi Bolter, 2 shots, hitting on 3s, and both miss. 6 shots from the Twin Heavy Bolter, hitting on 3s, getting 5 hits. Wounding on 5s, getting no wounds. And finally, the 2 Twin Last Cannons, 4 shots, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 3s, hitting 1 wound. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which it fails. And this will do D6 wounds, and it will do 6 wounds. So this Bloodthirster will drop from 16 wounds down to 10. Moving into the assault phase, there is only 1 charge to declare, which will be Mortarion declaring a charge onto the darker Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage. There is no overwatch, so here's the charge distance, getting 11 inches, which will be more than enough to put him within an inch. So Mortarion will finish his charge right here. He is within an inch of the Bloodthirster he is charging, and he made sure to stay more than 3 inches away from this Bloodthirster and from Scarbrand so that they could not heroically intervene. At the beginning of the fight phase, we first need to resolve Mortarion's Host of Plagues. So each unit within 7 inches of Mortarion, at the beginning of the fight phase, we roll a dice, and on a 4-up, they suffer D3 mortal wounds, and so that will be Scarbrand, both Bloodthirsters, and this Bloodletter squad. Starting with Scarbrand on a 4-up, and it does not. But the Death Guard will use a command point, going from 4 down to 3 in order to use a command reroll to reroll that dice roll, and still fails. The Bloodthirster Mortarion is in combat with will suffer D3 mortal wounds, and that will end up being 1 mortal wound. So the Bloodthirster will drop from 16 starting wounds down to 15. Now for this Bloodthirster on a 4-up, and it does not, and the Bloodletters on a 4-up, and it does. So D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 2. So 2 Bloodletters will go down. So Mortarion has 6 attacks base since he is at full wounds, and he will attack with his Reaping Scythe ability from Silence. So he will actually get 18 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s thanks to himself, getting 12 hits so far and 6 misses. And here's the re-rolls, getting 17 total hits. So because he's using Reaping Scythe, it's Strength User, so Strength 8, and he subtracts 1 from the toughness of enemies that are close by. Enemies that are within 7 inches subtract 1 from their toughness, so the Bloodthirster is Toughness 6. Either way, he'd be wounding on 3s, and thanks to his Warlord trait, he rerolls everything. But remember, because of the Psychic power, he adds 1 to his wound rolls, so he's actually wounding on 2s, but thanks to his rerolls, he has to reroll 1s and 2s because rerolls happen before modifiers. And we are looking for 6s because wound rolls of 7-up, and we add 1 to the wound rolls. Wound rolls of 7-up add an additional mortal wound on top of the normal damage. So, wounding on 3s, re-rolling. So re-rolling 1s and 2s, although normally those 2s would count. So far getting 8 wounds out of 17 hits with 1 6 so far. And here's the re-rolls. Ooh, getting all wounds and an extra 6. So 17 wounds plus 2 mortal wounds. So we'll take the Bloodthirster from 15 down to 13 wounds thanks to the mortal wounds. And now 17 5-up invulnerable saves. And so the Bloodthirster saves 6 out of the 17, which means he will lose 11 more wounds and go from 13 down to 2. Now, Mortarion will attack with his Attendant's Claws and Teeth, and he will make an additional D6 attacks with that weapon, and makes 2 additional attacks. So hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 2 hits. Strength 2 versus Toughness 6 means wounding on 6s, re-rolling everything. And because of the +1 to wound rolls, we're actually looking for 5s, but we still have to re-roll them the first time through. So, of course, we have to re-roll both of those because they're not actual 6s. But that's okay because 6s will give mortal wounds, which we actually want. So getting 1 actual wound so far, and a nothing. So the 1 wound and a 3-up armor save, which passes. So now the Bloodthirster will attack back. Because he is down to 2 wounds, he only has 2 attacks base, but because he was charged this turn, he gets an extra attack. So 3 attacks, hitting on 4s, getting 3 hits. And because the Bloodthirster is within 6 inches of the Demon Prince, he gets to re-roll failed hit rolls of 1. So he gets a hit, and because of the Miasma of Pestilence on Mortarion, the 4 doesn't actually hit, but unmodified hit rolls of 6 grant an additional hit. So the Bloodthirster with 3 attacks, and really only hitting on 5s, gets 4 hits. So because he's using the Mighty Strike, he has double the strength, and so will be wounding on 2s, and gets 4 wounds. So Mortarion will take 4 4-up invulnerable saves, and passes all 4. Of course he does. So that does nothing. And so that is the end of that fight phase. But actually, we need to go back because Scarbrand is within 8 inches of Mortarion and the Bloodthirster, which means they both get +1 to their attacks characteristic, which means I actually need to make 3 more attacks for Mortarion to begin with, which might finish off the Bloodthirster and made that whole Bloodthirster attack unnecessary. So, 3 attacks from Mortarion, 3 more attacks from Mortarion, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, and re-rolling the 1. Getting 3 hits, wounding on 2s, but re-rolling 1s and 2s. And 2, already we have 2 additional mortal wounds, so the Bloodthirster will go down, and so the 2 mortal wounds will go first, and that will remove the Bloodthirster. And would he have passed the 3 invulnerable saves? It would have passed 2 of them, so without those mortal wounds, the Bloodthirster would have stayed alive, at least for 1 more turn. But the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage does actually go down, thanks to Scarbrand giving both friends and foes an additional attack. Thank you, Scarbrand. And the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage goes down, and that will be first blood for the Death Guard. So Mortarion will choose not to consolidate because he's already pretty close to the Daemons of Khorne, and they're going to move towards him anyways. So moving into the morale test for Death Guard turn 1, units within 8 inches of Scarbrand do not take morale tests, which would include this squad of Bloodletters and this squad of Bloodletters. So their downed models are removed, but no morale tests are taken. So that is the end of the morale phase. Let's take a quick look at the tactical objective cards on the Death Guard side. Defend Objective 3, the Death Guard are now 1 turn into holding, thanks to the Demon Prince of Nurgle advancing up the board and being within 3 inches of the center of that objective marker, so they will hold on to that. Psychological Warfare was not completed, thanks to Scarbrand making it so that the Bloodletters could not fail their morale test, and because of that, the Death Guard will throw that one away and hope to draw a better one next turn. And then Overwhelming Firepower, score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during the shooting phase of your turn. Score if 3 or more enemy units were destroyed, score D3 victory points instead. The Death Guard took half of this unit off in the shooting phase and the psychic phase, but did not finish the job, but they will have to hold on to that because they can only throw 1 away per turn, but also because this is the mission kill confirmed, they cannot throw away any objective cards that are completed by destroying enemy units unless they are impossible to achieve. But it is definitely possible for the Death Guard to kill an enemy unit in the shooting phase, or finish destroying an enemy unit in the shooting phase. So they will hold on to that. But thanks to Mortarion killing that Bloodthirster in the assault phase, and thanks to Scarbrand giving him that extra attack needed to finish him off, the Death Guard did achieve first blood, and so they are now leading 1 victory point to 0. Going into Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 1, a reminder that the Chaos Demons of Khorne have all 7 of their starting command points, and the Death Guard are down to 3 of their command points. The Chaos Demons of Khorne will begin by drawing 3 tactical objective cards. So they begin with Overwhelming Firepower, score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during the shooting phase of your turn. If 3 or more enemy units were destroyed during the shooting phase of your turn, score D3 victory points instead. Tactical objective card number 2 is Delight in Despair. Score 1 victory point if your opponent failed a morale test during this turn. If an enemy unit failed a morale test during this turn whilst within 3 inches of any of your Slanesh demon units, score D3 victory points instead. And third is Blood and Guts. Score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during the fight phase of this turn. If 3 or more enemy units were destroyed during the fight phase of this turn, score D3 victory points instead. Going into the Chaos Demons of Khorne movement phase, we will begin with this full squad of Bloodletters, which will move up the board towards the Death Guard 6 inches. This squad of Fleshhounds will then move up the board 10 inches towards the Death Guard and to be near this squad of Bloodletters, which just finished its movement. And the Fleshhounds will finish their movement here. This Skull Cannon will remain still. The Demon Prince of Khorne with wings will move 12 inches up the board to be closer to the Death Guard. And the Demon Prince of Khorne will finish its movement here, just over 2 inches away from the Demon Prince of Nurgle. This Bloodthirster, since it still has 10 wounds left, is going to move 12 inches up the board, past Mortarion, closer to the Death Guard deployment zone. And he will finish his movement here, just over 2 inches away from Mortarion. Scarbrand is going to move 8 inches, or up to 8 inches, up the board towards Mortarion. Scarbrand will finish his movement here, just moving a few inches and being just over an inch away from Mortarion. This squad of Bloodletters is going to move up the board 6 inches towards Mortarion. The Bloodletters will finish their movement here, just over an inch away from Mortarion. these 2 skull cannons will remain still. This squad of bloodletters is going to move up the board 6 inches towards this demon prince. And that will be the end of the Chaos Daemons of Khorne turn 1 movement phase. Going into the shooting phase of Chaos Daemons of Khorne turn 1, we will begin with this skull cannon, which will fire into this Demon Prince of Nurgle since it is the closest visible enemy unit. D6 shots from the skull cannon, getting 2 shots, and they will use a command point to go from 7 down to 6 in order to re-roll the number of shots. And here's the re-roll, and they get 5. Because the skull cannon did not move, it will have 5 shots hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds. Demon Prince of Nurgle will take 2 5-up invulnerable saves and will pass 1. And the Death Guard will use a command point for a command reroll, going from 3 command points down to 2 in order to reroll the 1 failed. And they still fail. The skull cannon does D3 damage and does 2 damage. So the Demon Prince of Nurgle will take 2 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls and fails both. So the Demon Prince of Nurgle will go from 8 starting wounds down to 6. These 2 skull cannons are both going to fire into the Plague Burst Crawler, and because they're both using the exact same weapons, we will fire them together, even though normally you wouldn't do that. So D6 shots apiece, getting a total of 6 shots. Neither moved, so hitting on 3s, getting 4 hits. Wounding on 4s, getting 2 wounds. 2 5-up invulnerable saves, fails 1, passes 1. It will do D3 damage, and does 1 damage. And the Plague Burst Crawler has a 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which it fails. So the Plague Burst Crawler will go from 12 starting wounds down to 11. Moving into the Chaos Daemons of Khorne assault phase, we have multiple charges to declare. This squad of bloodletters will declare charge onto the Demon Prince. Scarbrand will declare charge onto Mortarion. This squad of bloodletters will declare charge onto Mortarion. This Bloodthirster will declare charge onto Mortarion. This Demon Prince of Khorne will declare charge onto the Demon Prince of Nurgle. This squad of bloodletters will declare charge onto the Demon Prince of Nurgle. And finally, the Fleshhounds will declare charge onto the Demon Prince of Nurgle. So starting with these bloodletters, onto the Demon Prince, here's their charge range, getting 11 inches. And 11 inches is just enough for this bloodletter to be within an inch of this Demon Prince of Nurgle. So they make it in. And here's where they end up, barely in combat. So now Scarbrand will declare his charge onto Mortarion, and he will overwatch with his pistol, hitting on a 6 and fails to hit. So here's the charge range, and Scarbrand makes it in. Next, the Bloodletters will charge in, and they definitely make it. And here's where they ended up in combat. And then the Bloodthirster will charge into Mortarion, and his charge range makes it in. And the Bloodthirster is now in combat. Moving over to here, we will start with the Fleshhounds onto the Demon Prince of Nurgle, and their charge range, 4 inches, which will not be enough. So the Chaos Daemons of Khorne will go from 6 command points down to 5 in order to re-roll one of those 2s. And the re-roll gives them 5 inches. And that's still not enough to make it in. So that is a failed charge. Now the Bloodletters will charge in, and they get 7 inches, which is enough to put them within an inch of the Demon Prince of Nurgle. And so then finally, the Demon Prince of Khorne will charge into the Demon Prince of Nurgle and gets 5 inches, which is more than enough. So first, I want to start with Scarbrand attacking Mortarion. And I also need to go back a moment and do his Bellow of Endless Fury. D6 shots, getting 5 shots. Automatically hits, wounding on 5s, getting 2 wounds. 2 4-up saves from Mortarion, and he passes 1. And it only does 1 damage, so 1 5-up Disgustingly Resilient, which passes anyways. So results in nothing. So at the beginning of the fight phase, before any attacks are resolved, we of course need to resolve Mortarion's Host of Plagues, because that happens at the beginning of each fight phase. So the Bloodthirster, the Bloodletters, and Scarbrand all have to roll a dice, and on a 4-up, they take D3 mortal wounds. So we'll start with the dice for Scarbrand, and it does D3 mortal wounds, which will be 3 mortal wounds, of course. So Scarbrand will go from 16 starting wounds down to 13. Then the Bloodthirster will roll next, and he rolls a 4 as well. So how many mortal wounds does he take? And he takes 2, so he goes from 10 down to 8. Then the Bloodletters next on a 4-up, and they roll a 4 as well. Mortarion rolls a 4 for them. Technically, this is a Death Guard roll, which is why the Chaos Demons of Khorne aren't using command points to re-roll it because they can't in order to try to save themselves. So the Death Guard want this to happen, obviously, in D3 mortal wounds, and it will cause 2. So 2 bloodletters will go down. So now we get into the actual fight phase, and we will start with Scarbrand. 6 attacks base, +1 for Rage Embroiled, and +1 for charging. So 8 attacks base. He will use his Mighty Strike, which is double the strength. So 8 attacks, hitting on 2s, hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s. Thanks to Miasma of Pestilence, but getting only 1s for re-rolls so far. So getting 7 hits, wounding on 2s, and getting 6 wounds. Mortarion will take his 4-up invulnerable save, and will pass 2, failing 4. So 4 go through, and they will do D6 damage apiece. So far, getting 16 damage. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne will use a command point for a command reroll dice, going from 5 down to 4 command points in order to reroll the 2. Try to get some more damage. And they do with a 5. So doing a total of 19 damage to Mortarion. So Mortarion, who only has 18 starting wounds, has to take 19 disgustingly resilient rolls. Looking for 5s and 6s, and passes 8 out of the 19, so fails 11. So Mortarion will go from 18 starting wounds down to 7. I went back and looked at it, and Scarbrand did get 2 6s when he hit, which gives him 2 additional hits. So the 2 additional hits, wounding on 2s, getting 2 wounds, 2 4-up invulnerable saves, fails both, and so these will do an additional D6 damage apiece for a total of 4 more damage. So 4 more disgustingly resilient rolls, and fails another 3. So Mortarion will go from 7 wounds down to 4. So Mortarion, from that 1 attack, lost 14 of his starting wounds. And so now that Scarbrand has finished fighting, the Death Guard, before another charging unit goes, will use the stratagem counteroffensive using their last 2 command points. The stratagem is used right after an enemy unit that charged has fought. Select one of your own eligible units and fight with it next. So the Death Guard will use their last 2 command points, so that Mortarion can get one last strike in before he is inevitably taken down, now that he's down to only 4 wounds. So Mortarion will obviously be the one fighting, and he is going to use his eviscerating blow, and he is going to try to finish off this Bloodthirster that has 8 wounds left before the Bloodthirster can strike, in order to try to stay alive a little longer. Thanks to Rage Embroiled from Scarbrand, he will have 5 attacks base using his eviscerating blow, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting all 5 hits. Because this is the heavier hitting version with ×2 strength, wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, and 6s cause additional mortal wounds. So far getting 2 mortal wounds and a regular wound, and 2 re-rolls, which causes 1 additional wound. So 4 wounds in total, plus 2 mortal wounds, which will take the Bloodthirster from 8 down to 6 wounds to begin with. Then he will have 4 5-up invulnerable saves, and fails all 4, of course. And these will do D6 damage apiece. And so that's 14 damage, and so just one of those 6s would have been enough to finish him off, and the Bloodthirster is removed. Should have put those attacks onto Scarbrand, would have finished off him, since he has 13 wounds left. But this way, the Bloodthirster now cannot attack Mortarion, and so the only ones left to attack Mortarion this turn from the Chaos Demons of Khorne is the squad of 6 Bloodletters. So the chance for Mortarion to stay alive is much, much better now. And so we'll go right into that vein and go with the Bloodletters, who are charging Mortarion. So because the Bloodletters charged, and they're within 8 inches of Scarbrand, they get extra attacks for charging and for Rage Embroiled, so 21 attacks from the Bloodletters onto Mortarion, hitting on 3s and re-rolling, or hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1s thanks to Scarbrand. And there's only 1 to re-roll, and the re-roll still fails to hit, but because of Miasma of Pestilence on Mortarion, they have to subtract 1 from their hit rolls, which means that 3s miss. And there were a lot of 3s and 2s in there, and so only 7 hits out of 19 attacks. I think I might have said 21 attacks before, but it's 19 because 3 for each of the 5 regular bloodletters and then 4 for the Blood Reaver. So that adds up to 19 attacks, but only getting 7 hits. So the bloodletters will wound on 5s, and 6s have a damage characteristic of 2 instead of 1, but no rerolls. And so that's only 2 wounds. 2 wounds out of 7 hits. So these will be 4-up saves. So starting with the one that has a damage characteristic of 1, which goes through, and then a 4-up invulnerable save for the attack that has a damage characteristic of 2, and that also goes through. So 3 damage will go through, which means Mortarion is guaranteed to stay alive, at least for this turn, and 5-up disgustingly resilient and passes 1. So Mortarion will go from 4 wounds down to 2, but Mortarion will still be alive at the end of this. So now we will move over to this squad of 5 bloodletters that charged, and they will pile in first, up to 3 inches per model. This way they will all be in combat. However, they are definitely more than 8 inches away from Scarbrand, so they do not get to take advantage of his special abilities. But because they charged, they get an extra attack for charging, so 11 attacks from this squad, hitting on 3s against the Demon Prince of Nurgle. Hitting on 3s, no rerolls, getting 7 hits out of 11 attacks. Strength 5 versus Toughness 6, so wounding on 5s. 6s have a damage characteristic of 2, and getting 3 6s, but no other wounds. So the Demon Prince will be alive at the end of this. 3 5-up invulnerable saves, fails all 3, and then 6 damage, so 6 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and passes 2, failing 4. So the Demon Prince will go from 8 starting wounds down to 4. So now, moving over to the Demon Prince of Khorne with wings and his Hellforged artifact, the Skull Reaver. He will attack the Demon Prince of Nurgle. 6 attacks with the Skull Reaver, and then 1 additional attack with his Malefic Talon. So 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 3 1s, and the re-rolls, getting 5 hits. Strength 11 versus Toughness 6 means wounding on 3s, and 6s cause an additional D3 mortal wounds on top of it, but getting no 6s and only getting 3 wounds. So the Demon Prince of Nurgle will have a 3 5-up invulnerable saves and will pass 1, with 2 going through. And these are D6 damage apiece, getting 9 damage. So 9 disgustingly resilient rolls, and passes 6 of them. What? Only losing 3 wounds. So going from 6 down to 3. Wow, that's a really good disgustingly resilient roll. Finally, the 1 Malefic Talon attack, hitting on a 2, re-rolling 1s, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it wounds. Demon Prince of Nurgle will have a 5-up invulnerable save, which it passes. So finally, on the Chaos Demons of Khorne side, this squad of bloodletters will attack. Because they charged, there's 21 attacks from the group, hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s. So far getting 4 definite misses from the 2s, so we'll just remove that. And then there are also 4 1s to re-roll. So starting with 13 hits, and then the 4 re-rolls, all of those hit. So getting 17 hits out of 21 attacks. Strength 5 versus Toughness 6 means 5s to wound, 6s do 2 damage instead of 1. No rerolls, so getting 6 wounds, with 3 of them doing 2 damage apiece. So starting with the 3 wounds that do 1 damage apiece, 5-up invuln, passes 1 and fails 2. And then the 3 that do 2 damage apiece, 5-up invuln, passes 2 of those, but fails 1. So a total of 4 damage goes through. So 4 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and he passes 1, but fails 3, and that is just enough to kill off the Demon Prince, and he is removed. And so before I forget, both the Demon Prince of Khorne and the Bloodletters will consolidate 3 inches towards the closest visible enemy unit, which happens to be the Land Raider. And I had forgotten to pile them in, but I would have done that, and so I sort of squished them all together, which is also why they were all able to attack, because they were all, if I had remembered the pile-in move, which I would have done, they all would have been within an inch, or within an inch of someone who's within an inch of the fight. So that's all good there. Here's where they end up, all nice and neatly around objective marker number 3. So the only fight left to resolve is the Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings against those Bloodletters. 7 attacks from his 2 Malefic Talons, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 7 hits. Strength 7 versus Toughness 3 means 2s to wound, and getting 6 wounds. 6 5-up invulnerable saves, and they fail 5. And so all 5 of these bloodletters are removed. And so this Demon Prince will consolidate 3 inches towards the closest visible enemy unit, right to there. And that is the end of Chaos Daemons of Khorne turn 1 fight phase. The only unit that would need to take a morale check is this group of bloodletters for losing 2 guys, but because Scarbrand is there, they do not have to take a morale test. So at the end of Chaos Daemons of Khorne turn 1, let's take a quick look at the tactical objective cards. Overwhelming Firepower, score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during the shooting phase of this turn. That did not happen. Delight in Despair, score 1 victory point if your opponent failed a morale test during this turn. If an enemy unit failed a morale test during this turn whilst within 3 inches of any Slanesh demon, score D3. That was not achieved, and they will toss that one away. And then Blood and Guts, score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during the fight phase of this turn. And that did happen. They killed 1 Demon Prince of Nurgle for 1 victory point, which brings the Chaos Demons of Khorne up to 1 victory point. So at the end of turn 1, the score is currently tied at 1 victory point apiece. Going into Death Guard turn 2, a reminder that the Death Guard have 0 command points left, and the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 4 command points left. The Death Guard need to draw 1 new tactical objective card, and they draw Defend Objective 4, score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 4 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. And Objective Marker 4 is this one right here, right next to the Demon Prince of Nurgle. So going into the movement phase for Death Guard turn 2, Mortarion will stay locked in combat with Scarbrand and the Bloodletters. This Plague Burst Crawler will remain still. This squad of Nurgling Swarms will remain still. This Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings is going to slightly reposition in order to get a better shot with Smite onto Scarbrand. And here's where the Demon Prince will end up, still within 3 inches of the center of objective marker number 4. This squad of Nurgling Swarms will remain still. And finally, this Chaos Land Raider is going to move a few inches backwards away from the Chaos Demons of Khorne, just enough to be just within 12 inches of the Chaos Demons of Khorne and to make it harder for them to charge the Land Raider in their next turn. And the Chaos Land Raider will end its movement here. Moving into the Death Guard turn 2 Psychic phase, we will start with this Demon Prince of Nurgle casting Smite onto Scarbrand, needing a 5 to pass, and it does. And the Demon Prince is too far away from the Fleshhounds with their Collar of Khorne for them to attempt to deny the Witch. So this will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 2, which will drop Scarbrand from 13 wounds down to 11. Next, Mortarion will attempt to cast Smite onto Scarbrand, needing a 5, and gets a 10. So the Fleshhounds will attempt to deny the Witch, and they fail to do so. Because the psychic test was a 10 and not more than 10, it still only does D3 mortal wounds and will do 1, which drops Scarbrand from 11 down to 10 wounds. Finally, Mortarion will cast Blades of Putrefaction onto himself, needing a 5, and fails to get it. Moving along into the shooting phase for Death Guard turn 2, we will start with Mortarion, who will fire the Lantern into Scarbrand, since it is a pistol weapon. Hitting on a 2, and re-rolling thanks to himself, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. So far, the Lantern has done nothing this game. Next, the Chaos Land Raider will shoot everything it has into the Demon Prince of Khorne, since it is the closest visible enemy unit. Starting with the Combi Bolter in rapid fire range, 4 shots, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 5s, getting 2 wounds. 2 3-up armor saves, and passes both. 6 shots from the Twin Heavy Bolter, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 5s, getting 2 wounds. -1 AP, so 2 4-up armor saves, and fails 1. So the Demon Prince of Khorne will go from 8 wounds down to 7. Finally, the 2 Twin Last Cannons, 4 shots, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 3s, and getting 1 wound. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which it passes. Lastly, in the shooting phase, the Plague Burst Crawler, which did not move, is going to shoot everything it has into the Chaos Demon of Khorne, since it is the closest visible enemy unit. Starting with the Heavy Slugga, 4 shots, hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 5s, getting 1 wound. 1 4-up armor save, and it passes. 2 Entropy Cannons, hitting on 4s, failing both. And finally, the Plague Burst Mortar, D6 shots, getting 4 shots. Hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, rerolling 1s, getting 1 wound. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which fails. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne will use one of their 4 command points, going from 4 down to 3, in order to reroll that dice, which passes. Going into the Death Guard assault phase for turn 2, there are no charges to declare. So we will go straight into the fight phase for Mortarion, Scarbrand, and that squad of Bloodletters. And so first and foremost, we need to resolve Mortarion's host of plagues on both the Scarbrand and the Bloodletters. Because of how wounded Mortarion is, it only activates on a 6-up now. So first we will attempt to activate on Scarbrand, needing a 6, and it gets a 6. So D6, D3 mortal wounds, and does 2. Bringing Scarbrand from 10 down to 8 wounds. And then on the Bloodletters, needing a 6, and fails to activate. So because this is the Death Guard turn, Mortarion will get to attack first, luckily for him, considering he only has 2 wounds left. He has 4 attacks base, +1, thanks to Scarbrand being within 8 inches, and he will put all 5 attacks using Eviscerating Blow onto Scarbrand. So 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, getting 5 hits, wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s, and rerolling the 1, getting all wounds. And because Blades of Putrefaction was not activated this psychic phase, he does not get +1 to the wound rolls, and he does not cause automatic mortal wounds for wound rolls of 7-up. So, not that that would have mattered here because no 6s were rolled, but just so we know. So 5 wounds go through. Scarbrand will take 5 5-up invulnerable saves and will pass 2, failing 3. The Chaos Demons of Khorne will go from 3 command points down to 2 in order to re-roll one of the failed invulns. And here's the re-roll, and it still goes through. So these 3 attacks do D6 damage apiece, so 3d6, and that is 16 wounds. So Scarbrand is definitely killed. And Scarbrand does not have any sort of explodes ability, so he is simply removed from the battlefield. And so now that Mortarion's normal attacks have been resolved, he will then use his Attendant's Claws and Teeth on the Bloodletters. And he gets D6 attacks, getting 5. So 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, getting 5 hits. Now these are strength 2, but because he forces enemies within 7 inches to subtract 1 from their toughness, the Bloodletters are only toughness 2, which means these are wounding on 4s, and because they're plague weapons, thanks to Mortarion's Warlord trait, he gets to reroll all failed wound rolls. So wounding on 4s, rerolling, getting 3 wounds so far, and 2 rerolls, with 1 more wound. So the Bloodletters will take 4 5-up invulnerable saves, and they fail 3. And so 3 Bloodletters will go down. Mortarion might survive this after all. So now the Bloodletters will attack back, and there are 2 regular guys and the 1 Blood Reaper left, so they have 4 attacks all together, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits, wounding on 5s, and failing to wound. So that is the end of that fight phase. Going into the morale phase, now that Scarbrand has been removed, these Bloodletters do need to roll for a morale check. They have a leadership of 7, and they lost 3 guys. So add 3 to this dice roll, and of course they roll a 6, because why not? So because of that, they get a total of 9. After subtracting the leadership of 7, they get a remainder of 2, which means that they lose 2 more Bloodletters. So now only the Blood Reaper remains in combat. So at the end of Death Guard turn 2, we'll take a quick look at the victory points and the tactical objective cards. First of which is that for slaying Scarbrand, the Death Guard get Slay the Warlord, which brings them up to 2 victory points. They now have no one on Defend Objective 3, so they will toss that one. They have not yet completed Overwhelming Firepower, and they are now 1 turn into Defending Objective 4. So at the end of Death Guard turn 2, the score sits at 2 victory points for the Death Guard and 1 victory point for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. Going into Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2, a reminder that the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 2 command points left, and the Death Guard have 0 command points left. The Chaos Demons of Khorne need to draw 2 new tactical objective cards. The first of which is No Prisoners. Score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during your turn. If between 3 and 5 enemy units were destroyed during your turn, score D3 victory points instead. If 6 or more enemy units were destroyed during your turn, score D3 plus 3 victory points instead. And the next tactical objective card is Defend Objective 5. Score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 5 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. And Objective Marker 5 is this one right here, currently being held by the Skull Cannon. Going into the movement phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2, we will start with the Demon Prince of Khorne moving 12 inches up the board to be closer to the Death Guard Chaos Land Raider. He will finish his movement right here, just over an inch away. Next, this squad of Bloodletters is going to move up the board 6 inches towards the Death Guard deployment zone, and they will finish their movement here. The Fleshhounds are going to move 10 inches up the board towards Mortarion, and they will finish their movement right here. This Bloodletter will remain locked in combat with Mortarion. This Skull Cannon will remain still. Both of these Skull Cannons will remain still. Going into the shooting phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2, we will start with this Skull Cannon, which will fire into the Chaos Land Raider. D6 shots, getting 2. 2 shots hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 4s, getting 1 wound. 1 4-up armor save, which it fails. And it will do D3 damage, and it will do 2 damage. So the Death Guard Chaos Land Raider will drop from 16 starting wounds down to 14. Next, this Skull Cannon will fire into this Demon Prince of Nurgle. D6 shots, getting 3 shots, hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits, wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds, 2 5-up saves, and passes 1. It will do D3 damage, it will do 1 damage, 1 disgustingly resilient roll, which fails. So this Demon Prince of Nurgle will go from 4 wounds down to 3. And finally, in the shooting phase, this Skull Cannon will also shoot the Demon Prince of Nurgle. The reason why he's able to is thanks to this building, he cannot see Mortarion, and so this Demon Prince is the closest visible enemy unit. So D6 shots, and they are going to use a command point to re-roll that. So going from 2 command points down to 1 left, re-rolling the number of shots, and they get 4. 4 shots hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits, wounding on 3s, and fails to wound. Wow, that's really bad for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. That's really bad. That's absolutely terrible, because that means this Demon Prince will be free to complete Defend Objective 4. So that's a problem. So going into the assault phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 2, there are 3 charges to declare. First is the Chaos Demon of Khorne, Chaos Demon Prince of Khorne, declaring a charge on the Chaos Land Raider. Second is this squad of Bloodletters, declaring a charge on the Chaos Land Raider. And third will be this squad of Fleshhounds declaring a charge on Mortarion. So we'll start with the Demon Prince, and we'll start with the Overwatch. 4 shots from the Combi Bolter, hitting on 3s, or hitting on 6s, getting 1 hit, wounding on a 5, and fails to wound. 6 shots from the Twin Heavy Bolter, hitting on 6s, getting no hits. And finally, the 2 Twin Last Cannons, 4 shots hitting on 6s, and fails to hit. Demon Prince's charge range is more than enough. Now the Bloodletters will charge. No Overwatch, since the Land Raider's already locked in combat. They will be charging through a crater, so subtract 2 from this roll. They get 5 inches, and that won't be enough to make it in. Finally, these Fleshhounds into Mortarion. They're also charging through a crater, getting 6 inches, so really a 4-inch charge, which is just barely enough for them to make it within an inch. So they will make it into combat. And they will finish their charge move right here. Thanks to this guy, they managed to make it into combat. So at the beginning of the fight phase, we will first do Mortarion's Host of Plagues, starting with the Bloodletter. On a 6, that was almost a 6, but it doesn't go off. And then on the Fleshhounds, and that also doesn't go off. So the Fleshhounds will then pile in 3 inches, and so now the entire Fleshhound group is either within an inch of Mortarion or within an inch of someone who is within an inch of Mortarion. And we'll start with the Demon Prince of Khorne against the Land Raider. 6 attacks from the Skull Reaver on the charge, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting all hits. Strength 11 versus Toughness 8 means 3s to wound. and 6s cause mortal wounds, so we'll keep track of that. No rerolls. So far there are 4 normal wounds to save, but first, 2 D3 mortal wounds thanks to the 2 6s. So 3 mortal wounds, and the Chaos Demons of Khorne are going to use their last command point to re-roll one of those dice. So they will re-roll the 2, because it can't get any worse, and so it goes from 3 mortal wounds up to 4, which will drop the Chaos Land Raider from 14 wounds down to 10. The Skull Reaver is minus 4 AP, so these are only 6-up armor saves, and the Land Raider fails all 4, and these are D6 wounds apiece. So if we average 3 wounds per dice roll, this will kill the Land Raider. And so that does a grand total of 14 wounds, and so this Land Raider will be removed. On a 6, it will explode, and it does not explode. So the models inside will now disembark, and so here's where the units inside ended up after disembarking and after the Land Raider was removed. There were 10 models inside, so we need to roll 10 dice, and any rolls of 1 will remove models. Here's the dice rolls. And getting 4 1s. Oh no, that's awful. Well, the models that will be removed will be the 4 Plague Marines with bubotic axes, and they will have to take a morale check. And the Demon Prince of Khorne is not going to consolidate because he would have to consolidate to the closest visible enemy unit, and he is just over an inch away from the squad already, so he cannot consolidate any closer. So the Flesh Hounds are the last charging unit that needs to attack, so we will do the Flesh Hounds onto Mortarion. All 8 are able to attack, and so that will be 24 attacks on the charge. Mortarion did not activate Miasma of Pestilence, and so the Flesh Hounds will be hitting on 3s. Getting a total of 14 hits, wounding on 5s, and getting 3 wounds. So 3 4-up saves from Mortarion, and he fails all 3. They are 1 damage apiece, so 3 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and he fails all 3 of those, and so Mortarion will be removed. Because he lost his last wound and failed his last disgustingly resilient roll, he will roll a dice, and on a 4-up, all units that don't have the Nurgle keyword, so obviously all enemies in this instance, within 7 inches suffer D3 mortal wounds. So here's the dice roll, and it goes off. So starting with the lone bloodletter, it suffers 1 mortal wound, which will remove that bloodletter. And then the Fleshhounds suffer D3 mortal wounds, and they suffer 2, so 1 Fleshhound will go down. And then Mortarion is removed from the battlefield. And then they will consolidate, and because through the doorway they can see the Demon Prince of Nurgle, they will move up a little bit just to be in better coherency. So that's the end of the fight phase. Going into the morale phase, the Plague Marines lost 4 models, and their champion has a leadership of 8. So here's their morale test, and they fail by 1. So they will lose one of the Flails of Corruption. So that will be the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 2. Let's take a quick look at the tactical objective cards and the victory points. Thanks to killing Mortarion, they have achieved Slay the Warlord, which brings them up to 2 victory points. For overwhelming firepower, they did not achieve it because that Demon Prince of Nurgle stayed alive, and both the Land Raider and the Warlord Mortarion were killed in the fight phase, not the shooting phase. No prisoners, score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during your turn. If between 3 and 5, then D3 victory points, and if 6 or more, then D3 plus 3. Only 2 full units were destroyed, thanks to those Plague Marines still having 2 models left, and none of the single model units, such as the Plague Surgeon, being taken out. So they only took out 2 full units, once again, thanks to that Demon Prince of Nurgle surviving. So they only get 1 victory point for that. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne are now 1 turn into defending objective marker 5. So at the end of turn 2, Chaos Demons of Khorne have 3 victory points, and the Death Guard have 2 victory points. Going into Death Guard turn 3, a reminder that both sides have 0 command points left. The Death Guard need to draw 1 new tactical objective card. They get Grandfather's Gift, score 1 victory point if at least 1 enemy unit was completely destroyed during your turn, and the last model in the unit was slain by an attack made by a Death Guard model attacking with a plague weapon. So going into the Death Guard movement phase, this Demon Prince of Nurgle will remain still, this Plague Burst Crawler will remain still, this group of Nurglings Nurgling swarms will remain still. This group of Nurgling swarms will remain still. These models will move and reposition themselves to be closer to the Bloodletters. Starting with the Plague Marines, 5 inches of movement will put them right here. Next will be the Malignant Plaguecaster, which will end his movement right here. Now for the Plague Surgeon, who will move right to there, and the Tallyman will finish his movement right here. Going into the Death Guard Psychic phase, we will start with the Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings, casting Smite into these Flesh Hounds, and they are just within 18 inches, and he can see them through the door of this ruin. So needing a 5, and he gets it. They will attempt to deny, needing better than a 7, and they deny it. So now this Malignant Plaguecaster will attempt to cast Smite onto the Demon Prince of Khorne, needing a 5, and gets it. D3 mortal wounds, and gets 2. So the Demon Prince of Khorne will go from 7 wounds down to 5. Finally, the Malignant Plaguecaster will cast Putrescent Vitality onto the Plague Marines. And it needed a 6 to pass, so it fails. So now going into the shooting phase, we will start with the Plague Burst Crawler, which will fire everything that it has into this squad of Bloodletters. Starting with the 4 shots from the Heavy Slugger, hitting on 4s, getting 3 hits, wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds, 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and fails both. So 2 Bloodletters will go down. Now for the 2 Entropy Cannons, 2 shots, hitting on 4s, failed to hit. And finally, the Plague Burst Mortar, D6 shots, getting 2 shots, hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits, wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 2 wounds, 2 5-up invulnerable saves, passes 1, fails 1, and it does D3 damage apiece, but they're only 1 wound models, so 1 more Bloodletter is removed. So then we've got a Bolt Pistol from the Plague Surgeon into the Bloodletters, hitting on a 3, and it hits, wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. Bolt Pistol from the Plague Champion, hitting on a 3, and it hits, wounding on a 3, and it wounds, 5-up invulnerable save, and fails. So 1 more Bloodletter will go down. Bolt Pistol from the Malignant Plaguecaster, hitting on a 3, and fails to hit. And now a Plasma Pistol from the Tallyman into the Bloodletters. Standard shot, hitting on a 3, and it fails to hit. That's it for shooting. So now moving into the assault phase, we have 4 charges to declare. Plague Marines will declare charge into the Bloodletters. Plague Surgeon will declare charge into the Bloodletters. Malignant Plaguecaster will declare charge into the Bloodletters. And the Tallyman will declare charge into the Bloodletters. So we will start with the Plague Surgeon, charging through a crater, and he's in. Next will be the Plague Marines, and they're in. Now the Malignant Plaguecaster, charging through a crater, and he's in. With a wobbly model syndrome, so he will probably fall over. And finally the Tallyman, charging through a crater, which won't be enough, so he will remain out. However, his 7-inch aura for re-rolling failed hit rolls is still in range for the other models in the combat. We will begin with the Malignant Plaguecaster, 3 attacks with his Corrupted Staff, hitting on 3s, re-rolling, thanks to the Tallyman, getting 2 re-rolls, and 2 hits. Strength 6 versus Toughness 3 means 2s to wound, and getting 1 wound. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which fails, so 1 more Bloodletter will go down. Next, the Plague Marines will attack, starting with the Plague Champion, who will attack with his Power Fist. 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1s and 2s. Of course, he rolls a 3, so getting 1 hit. Wounding on a 2, which wounds. A single 5-up invulnerable save, which fails, so 1 more Bloodletter will go down. Now for the Plague Marine with the Flail of Corruption, he will do D3 attacks, and we'll get 3. So 3 attacks, hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s and 2s, and 1 re-roll so far. That was a hit before it got knocked over, so 2 hits total. Strength 6 versus Toughness 3 is 2s to wound, and it is a plague weapon, so re-rolling 1s, thank goodness. Apparently 2-ups are very hard to hit, or hard to wound with, so getting 2 wounds. So 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and passes 1, fails 1, but the Flail of Corruption is 2 damage apiece, and it has a special rule so that the damage is not lost after a model's killed, so you keep allocating until either the entire enemy unit is destroyed or until you're out of damage to allocate. So even though only 1 went through, 2 Bloodletters will go down from that. And so then finally, the Plague Surgeon will attack. He has 3 attacks with his Bale Sword, hitting on 3s, re-rolling, thanks to the Tallyman. And here's the re-roll, getting 3 hits, wounding on 3s, re-rolling 1s, of course rolling a 2. So 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and they fail both. and so these blood letters will go down. And so now that the blood letters have been completely removed, now these units will consolidate 3 inches towards the Demon Prince of Khorne, since he is the closest visible enemy unit. And here's where they will end up, all over an inch away, well over an inch away from the Demon Prince. And so that is the end of the fight phase for Death Guard turn 3. There are no morale checks to take. So taking a look at the tactical objective cards, the Death Guard have still not completed Overwhelming Firepower. However, they did now complete Defend Objective 4, thanks to the Demon Prince of Nurgle surviving the last Chaos Daemons of Khorne shooting phase. So they get 2 victory points for that. Brings them up to a total of 4 so far. And the Death Guard did complete Grandfather's Gift, thanks to those final 2 blood letters going down to the Bale Sword from the Plague Surgeon. And that entire unit was completely wiped out this turn, all 10 models. So that is worth 1 victory point, which brings the Death Guard up to 5. And they cannot throw away Overwhelming Firepower, so they will hold on to that. And so at the end of the top of turn 3, the end of Death Guard turn 3, the Death Guard are currently leading 5 victory points to 3. Going into Chaos Daemons of Khorne, turn 3, Chaos Daemons of Khorne need to draw 1 new tactical objective card, and they draw Hold the Line, score 1 victory point if you have at least 3 units completely within your deployment zone, and your opponent has no models within your deployment zone at the end of your turn. This objective cannot be achieved on your first turn. Well, that's a guaranteed victory point, because the Skull Cannons have not moved and they all started within the deployment zone. And so that's the 3 units, and the Death Guard aren't anywhere near the Chaos Daemons of Khorne deployment zone. So that's a guaranteed victory point. So at the start of the Chaos Daemons of Khorne movement phase, the Demon Prince of Khorne is going to move 12 inches towards the Plague Burst Crawler, and he will finish his movement here. Next, the Flesh Hounds are going to move 10 inches up the board towards the Plague Burst Crawler, and they will finish their movement here. Then this Skull Cannon and those 2 Skull Cannons will remain still. Going into the shooting phase, we will start with this Skull Cannon. We'll fire into that squad of Plague Marines. So D6 shots, getting 3 shots, hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits, wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds, minus 2 AP, so 2 5-up armor saves, and they both pass. All right. So now this Skull Cannon will shoot the Demon Prince of Nurgle. D6 shots, hitting 6, hitting on 3s, and all hit. Wounding on 3s, getting 5 wounds. Demon Prince will take 5 up invulnerable saves and fails 3. And these will do D3 damage apiece for a total of 5 damage. So 5 up disgustingly resilient rolls, and the Demon Prince is killed. And so now that Demon Prince has been killed, the other Skull Cannon will fire on the Plague Burst Crawler. D6 shots, also getting 6 shots. Hitting on 3s, getting all hit again. Wounding on 4s, getting 4 wounds. 4 5-up invulnerable saves, makes 2 of them. So 2 D3 damage, and that will be 5 damage. 5 disgustingly resilient rolls, and passes 2 but fails 3. So the Plague Burst Crawler will go from 11 wounds down to 8. Going into the assault phase, we have 2 charges to declare. First is the Flesh Hounds declaring a charge onto the Plague Burst Crawler. Second is the Demon Prince of Khorne declaring a charge onto the Plague Burst Crawler. We will start with the Demon Prince. So Overwatch from the Plague Burst Crawler, starting with the Heavy Slugger, 4 shots, hitting on 6s, failing to hit. 2 shots from the Entropy Cannons, fails to hit. And D6 shots from the Plague Burst Mortar, 1 shot, hitting on a 6, and fails to hit. So now the charge distance from the Demon Prince getting 7 inches, and that is just enough to be within an inch of the Plague Burst Crawler. So now the Flesh Hounds will charge through a crater, and they get 12 inches. So after subtracting the 2 for going through the crater, they have 10 inches of total charge movement. And here's where they ended up. Everyone is either within an inch or within an inch of someone who's within an inch of the Plague Burst Crawler. And just so that I don't forget, we'll do the pile and move first. But we'll begin with the Demon Prince of Khorne and his Skull Reaver. 6 attacks on the charge, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, getting 6 hits. Strength 11 on the charge versus Toughness 8 means 3s to wound, getting 4 wounds. 4 5-up invulnerable saves, and passes 3. And before I forget, there were 2 6s from the wound rolls, so 2 D3 mortal wounds we'll do 3 mortal wounds onto the Plague Burst Crawler. So that will drop it from 8 to 5. And so then the wound from the Skull Reaver that got past the invulnerable save will do d6 damage, and it'll do 3 damage. 3 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and fails all 3. So the Plague Burst Crawler will drop from 5 wounds down to 2. And so then we have one last Malefic Talon attack from the Demon Prince of Khorne. 1 attack, hitting on a 2, and it hits, wounding on a 4, because he's +1 strength on the charge, but it fails to wound. So now the 21 attacks from the Fleshhounds who charged, hitting on 3s, getting a good solid hit with only 5 misses. So 16 hits out of 21 attacks, wounding on 5s, and getting 6 wounds. And these are -1 AP, so 6 4-up armor saves, and that made a difference because 4 go through, but they are only 1 damage apiece, so 4 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and they pass 2 but fail 2, and so the Plague Burst Crawler will be removed. And on a 5-up, the Plague Burst Crawler explodes, and it does not, so it is simply removed. And so now they will consolidate, and these Nurglings are the closest visible enemy unit, so they will maneuver a little bit, and that's where they end up. And that is the end of this fight phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 3. And there are no morale checks to take. So now at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 3, we'll take a quick look at the victory points and the tactical objective cards. Chaos Demons of Khorne did achieve Hold the Line for 1 victory point. They have now successfully defended Objective 5 for 2 full turns, which gives them 2 victory points. And they finally killed an enemy unit in the shooting phase, 3 turns into the game for 1 victory point. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne don't have to throw any tactical objective cards away, and they have a clean slate for the next turn. So at the end of turn 3, the score is currently 7 victory points for the Chaos Demons of Khorne and 5 victory points for the Death Guard. Going into Death Guard turn 4, they need to draw 2 new tactical objective cards. The first will be No Prisoners. Score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during your turn. If between 3 and 5 were destroyed, score D3. And if 6 or more enemy units were destroyed, score D3 plus 3 victory points. Well, that will be fairly difficult considering that they've got a bunch of Nurgling swarms and then a couple infantry characters. And then the second one is Supremacy. Score D3 victory points if you control any 3 objective markers at the end of your turn. So going into the movement phase, we will start with the Plague Marines moving 5 inches towards objective marker 3, and they will also declare an advance at the same time. So here's the advance roll, and they get 1 inch, and they are not within 3 inches of the center of objective marker 3. Now the Plague Surgeon will move 5 inches towards objective marker 3 and also declare an advance. And he gets 5 inches. And here's where the Plague Surgeon ended up, and he will be controlling objective marker 3. Then the Malignant Plaguecaster will move a few inches closer to the Demon Prince in order to be able to cast Smite. And he will finish his movement right here. And finally, the Tallyman will move up to 5 inches to be closer to the Plague Marines and the Malignant Plaguecaster. He will finish his movement right here, and this way all of the other units are within his 7-inch bubble for being able to reroll failed hit rolls in close combat. Not that that will help the Death Guard this turn. This Nurgling Swarm will remain still, and that Nurgling Swarm will remain still. So moving into the Death Guard Psychic phase, the Malignant Plaguecaster will cast Smite onto the Demon Prince of Khorne, needing a 5, and gets an 11. So the Fleshhounds will attempt to deny the Witch, and they do not. And because the result was over 10, the Malignant Plaguecaster will do D6 wounds to the Demon Prince instead of D3, and it will do 4 mortal wounds. So the Demon Prince will go down to 1 wound. Too bad all of their pistols are out of range of the Demon Prince to try to finish it off. And then the Malignant Plaguecaster will cast Putrescent Vitality onto himself. He'll need a 6, and he gets it. So moving into the shooting phase, there's nothing within range of the various pistols that the Plague Marines and the Plague Surgeon, Malignant Plaguecaster, and Tallyman have. So there's no shooting. And so then moving into the assault phase, there are no charges to declare. So that is the end of Death Guard turn 4. Let's take a look at the tactical objective cards. So the Death Guard did achieve Supremacy for holding D3, or for holding 3 separate objective markers. So they get D3 victory points. And that roll will give them just 1 victory point. And they did not accomplish no prisoners or overwhelming firepower thanks to that Demon Prince staying alive and being out of range of their pistols, so they do not get either of those, and they are not able to throw either of those away. And so at the end of Death Guard turn 4, the score currently sits at 6 victory points for the Death Guard and 7 victory points for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. Going into Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 4, they need to draw 3 new tactical objective cards. First is Witch Hunter, score 1 victory point if at least 1 enemy psyker was destroyed during this turn. Second is Mission Critical Objective. When this tactical objective is generated, roll a d6, score 1 victory point if you control the corresponding objective marker. If the corresponding objective marker was controlled by your opponent at the start of your turn, you control it, and you control it at the end of your turn, score D3 victory points instead. So the mission critical objective will be number 2. And objective marker 2 is this one right here, currently being held by the Nurglings. And the third tactical objective is secure objective 4. Score 1 victory point if you control objective marker 4 at the end of your turn. And objective marker 4 is this one right here that the Demon Prince of Nurgle was holding a couple turns ago. So at the beginning of the movement phase, the first thing that will happen is this skull cannon is going to move up the board 6 inches, and it will also declare an advance. Here's its advance roll, and it gets 5 more inches. And so after advancing, it will end up right here. This skull cannon will remain still. These flesh hounds are going to move 10 inches up the board towards the Nurglings. And they will all finish their movement right here. Next, this Demon Prince is going to move 12 inches towards the Malignant Plaguecaster, and he will finish his movement right here. Finally, this skull cannon will remain still. So moving into the shooting phase, we will start with the skull cannon, which will shoot the Plague Marines. D6 shots, and we'll do 6. Hitting on 3s, getting all hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 3 wounds. 3 5-up armor saves, and they fail all 3. And these will do D3 damage apiece, so they have to be done separately. So the first one will do 1 damage. So 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, re-rolling 1s thanks to being within 3 inches of the Plague Surgeon, and they still fail. And so the Plague Champion will go down so that the last guy can still remain within 3 inches of the Plague Surgeon, but he will have to take the rest of the damage, so that's 2 D3 damage, which will do 4 damage. 4 5-up disgustingly resilient, and would have failed them all anyways, no 1s. So that Plague Marine squad is finished off. And so now this skull cannon, which did not move, is within range and can see the Nurglings. So it will fire its skull cannon into them. D6 shots, getting 2 shots. Hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 2s, getting 1 wound in a cocked dice, and both wound. 2 5-up invulnerable saves, both fail. And because of the Nurgling's squishable ability, they do not get disgustingly resilient against attacks that have a damage characteristic of anything other than a 1. And because they're D3 damage apiece from the skull cannons, they don't get to take advantage of this. So the Nurglings are 4 wounds apiece. The first damage will do 3, and because they're only 4 wounds apiece, that means the second one, doesn't matter what it does, but it removes a single Nurgling swarm, and they don't get any disgustingly resilient for that. So that's the end of the shooting phase. We have 2 charges to declare in the assault phase. Flesh Hounds into the Nurglings, and the Demon Prince into the Malignant Plaguecaster. So starting with the Flesh Hounds, who are not charging through a crater, they get 8 inches of charge. And here's where they ended up after charging. Before I forget, I'll just do the pile-in movement so that I don't forget that. And then over here, the Malignant Plaguecaster will fire a bolt pistol in Overwatch, hitting on a 6, and fails to hit. Charge distance, and more than enough. And he is not within 3 inches of the Tallyman for heroic intervention. So we'll start with this combat against the Malignant Plaguecaster. Malignant Plaguecaster did get off the psychic power in his last psychic phase, so he does have +1 toughness and +1 strength for this combat. So 6 attacks from the Skull Reaver to start, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 1 re-roll. And here's the re-roll. Gets another hit. So strength 11 versus toughness 6 means wounding on 3s, getting 4 wounds with an automatic D3 mortal wounds. So here's the D3 mortal wounds to start, getting 2 mortal wounds. So the Malignant Plaguecaster goes from 4 starting wounds down to 2. And then the Skull Reaver is -4 AP. And of course it's the Plague Surgeon who has the separating plate, not the Malignant Plaguecaster. So he only has his 3-up armor save and no invuln. So all 4 wounds go through the armor save, and they do d6 damage apiece. So that will do a grand total of 15 damage. So because he has 2 wounds left, he has to make 14 out of these 15 disgustingly resilient rolls in order to stay alive. And he's dead. So the Malignant Plaguecaster is removed after failing 11 out of the 15 disgustingly resilient rolls. Now for the Flesh Hounds against the Nurgling Swarms, 21 attacks hitting on 3s. Getting 14 hits out of 21 attacks, wounding on 2s. Strength 5 versus Toughness 2, getting a couple 1s in there. So getting 11 wounds. So 11 5-up invulnerable saves, and they pass 5 of them. And these are only 1 damage apiece, so they get 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls. And they pass 2, but fail 4. And so that will remove a second Nurgling Swarm. So the Nurgling Swarm will get to attack back with 4 attacks, hitting on 4s, getting 1 hit. Wounding on a 6, re-rolling 1s, and re-rolling the 1, and fails to wound. So that's the end of that combat. And so now the Nurgling Swarms have to take a morale test. They have a leadership of 7. They lost 2 guys, so if they roll a 6, they lose their last model, and they pass. So they will remain locked in combat. And the Demon Prince of Khorne will choose not to consolidate. So at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 4, let's take a quick look at the tactical objective cards. They did complete Witch Hunter, since they killed the Malignant Plaguecaster, so they get 1 victory point for that. They have not yet completed Mission Critical Objective number 2, since that Nurgling Swarm stayed alive, and they currently have not secured Objective 4, but they will hold on to both of those. And so at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 4, which is also the end of game turn 4, the score currently sits at 8 victory points for the Chaos Demons of Khorne, and 6 victory points for the Death Guard. Going into Death Guard turn 5, the Death Guard need to draw 1 new tactical objective card. And they draw Spread Contagion. When this tactical objective is generated, nominate 1 of your Death Guard characters, score 1 victory point if this character is still alive at the end of the game. So the Death Guard will nominate their Plague Surgeon, since he is the one who has the Relic the Separating Plate, giving him a better armor save, and because he gives himself the better Disgustingly Resilient rolls. So he will be their character for that tactical objective. So going into the movement phase for Death Guard turn 5, this squad of Nurglings will remain still. That Nurgling Swarm will remain locked in combat. The Plague Surgeon is going to move 5 inches up the board, and he will finish his movement here. And the Tallyman will also move 5 inches up the board, and be just over an inch away from the Demon Prince. Going into the Psychic phase, the Death Guard no longer have any Psychers, so the Psychic phase will now be gone from the rest of the battle report. Going into the Shooting phase, we will start with the Tallyman shooting his Plasma Pistol into the Demon Prince. Standard shot, hitting on a 3, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it wounds. 5-up invulnerable save, and it fails. And so they shoot and kill the Demon Prince of Khorne. And there's nothing within range of the bolt pistol from the Plague Surgeon, so that will be the end of the Death Guard shooting phase. Moving into the assault phase, there are no charges to declare, so we will simply move into the fight phase and resolve this combat. So this Nurgling Swarm will attack first, since it is the Death Guard turn. Onto the Flesh Hounds, 4 attacks, hitting on 4s, getting 3 hits. Strength 2 versus Toughness 4 means 6s to wound, re-rolling 1s, thanks to being a plague weapon, and getting 1 wound. The Flesh Hounds will take a single 5-up invulnerable save, which they fail. So 1 Flesh Hound will go from 2 wounds down to 1. Since the Flesh Hounds were locked in combat, they will only have 14 attacks back onto the Nurgling Swarm, hitting on 3s, getting 11 hits. Wounding on 2s, getting 3 1s, getting 8 wounds in total, 8 5-up invulnerable saves, and pass 3. So 5 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls. If the Nurgling Swarm passes at least 2, they survive. And they do. And so they will go down to 1 wound. And to be honest, that might actually be bad for the Death Guard, because that means at the beginning of the Khorne turn, the Death Guard will be controlling this objective and potentially give the Chaos Demons of Khorne 3 victory points from being able to roll a d3 instead of just 1. So that might actually be bad that the Nurgling survived. But that's the end of the fight phase, and there's no morale test to take, as there were no models that were actually lost. And so that is the end of Death Guard turn 5. Taking a look at the tactical objective cards, they finally got overwhelming firepower for 1 victory point, thanks to that plasma pistol. And because of that, they also got no prisoners, and they get 1 victory point for that. And they will hold on to Spread Contagion. And so at the end of Death Guard turn 5, the score is currently tied at 8 victory points apiece. Going into Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 5, the Chaos Demons of Khorne need to draw 1 new tactical objective card. They draw Priority Orders Received. When this tactical objective is generated, immediately generate a bonus tactical objective. This does not count towards the number of active tactical objectives you currently have in play. Your Warlord is the only unit that can be used to achieve the bonus tactical objective. Okay, well, that automatically doesn't matter then, because the Warlord's dead. So the bonus tactical objective is Secure Objective 2. But that doesn't matter, because that's going to be thrown away at the end of the turn because Scarbrand is dead. So going into the movement phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 5, this Skull Cannon will remain still. This Skull Cannon is going to move up the board 6 inches and advance towards objective marker 4. Here's the advance roll, and getting 4 inches. So this Skull Cannon will end its movement here after advancing and is now within 3 inches of the center of objective marker number 4. This Skull Cannon is going to move 6 inches in order to reposition to be able to see that Plague Surgeon across the map. So this Skull Cannon will end up here. It will suffer a negative modifier to its hit rolls, but now it is able to see and potentially shoot that Plague Surgeon, which is the closest visible enemy unit. And it is closer than the Tallyman and that lone Nurgling Swarm. So going into the shooting phase, we'll just start with this one, the Skull Cannon that moved, D6 shots, getting 5 shots, hitting on 4s since it moved, and getting 3 hits. Wounding on 3s, and getting 3 wounds. -2 AP, so because of the separating plate, the Plague Surgeon will have a 4-up armor save and fails 2. D3 damage apiece, and that's 6 damage. So 6 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and fails 5, but re-rolling the 1s, thanks to himself, and passes 1 more, but still fails 1, so losing 4 wounds. And what do you know, the Plague Surgeon only has 4 wounds to begin with, so the Plague Surgeon is just killed off. So the tactical objective for keeping him alive is now complete waste for the Death Guard. And so now, because it doesn't have any better targets, this Skull Cannon, which did not move, will shoot the Tallyman. D6 shots, getting 6 of course, hitting on 3s, getting 5 hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 4 wounds. The Tallyman will take 4 5-up armor saves. Passes 2. These will do D3 damage apiece, and it'll only do 2 damage. And so then the Tallyman will take 2 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls and passes both, so he stays fully healthy. And so that's the end of the shooting phase. So now we will move right into the assault phase, and there's no charges to declare. So in the fight phase, we have the Fleshhounds, which will attack first onto the Nurgling Swarm. 14 attacks from the Fleshhounds onto the Nurgling Swarm, hitting on 3s, getting 9 hits. Wounding on 2s, getting 8 wounds. 8 5-up invulnerable saves, and passes 2. So 6 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and fails 3. So this Nurgling Swarm is removed. And the Fleshhounds will not consolidate. And so that is the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 5. Looking at the tactical objective cards, they will toss Priority Orders Received with the bonus objective. They did secure Objective 4, thanks to that Skull Cannon advancing for 1 victory point. And they did complete Mission Critical Objective number 2, and because the Death Guard did control it at the beginning of this turn, they get D3 victory points, and roll a 3, of course. So at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 5, potentially the end of the game, the score currently sits at 12 victory points for the Chaos Demons of Khorne, and 8 victory points for the Death Guard. So we will roll a dice here, and on a 3-up the game continues, on a 1 or a 2 the game ends, and the game is over. And so, at the end of the game, after all the points have been tallied up, of course giving the Chaos Demons of Khorne an extra victory point for Line Breaker, thanks to the Fleshhounds being in the Death Guard deployment zone. The final score is 15 for the Death Guard and 22 for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. So the Chaos Demons of Khorne win a major victory by a difference of 7 victory points. And remember that because this is the mission kill confirmed, you get points for completing the tactical objectives, but you also get additional victory points for each full enemy unit that you killed off throughout the game. And the Death Guard lost 9 full units, whereas the Chaos Demons of Khorne only lost 7 full units. So the Death Guard managed to achieve First Blood and slay the Warlord. Chaos Demons of Khorne achieved slay the Warlord and Linebreaker, but they killed off 2 more full units, and they definitely had more in terms of victory points achieved through the tactical objectives, because they completed 8, and 2 of them were worth multiple victory points. 1 was worth 2, 1 was worth 3, whereas the Death Guard only completed 5 tactical objective cards, and only 1 of them was worth 2. Of course, they did not get Spread Contagion for keeping their Plague Surgeon alive, so they don't get any points for that at the end of the game. And so we have a major victory for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. So now that the game is over and the points have been tallied up and it's been announced that the Chaos Demons of Khorne have been declared the victors through a major victory of 22-15, wanted to go over some final thoughts that I had on this particular game, things that I thought went well, some things that I know I forgot to do. And first and foremost, and the biggest thing that I need to put out there before continue on with this talk is I made a very, very major strategic error involving Skarbrand's fight against Mortarion. Because you see, the Chaos Demons of Khorne, they have a little stratagem called Frenetic Bloodlust. Use this stratagem at the end of any fight phase. Select one of your Khorne demon units. That unit can immediately fight again. So remember how at the end of turn 1, the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 1, bottom of turn 1, the end of that fight phase, and Mortarion had a grand total of, what was it, 2 wounds left? 2 wounds or 4 wounds? Either way, Mortarion was practically dead after that fight phase. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne definitely had more than 3 command points left, and so had they used that stratagem at the end of that fight phase, Skarbrand could have fought a second time, and most definitely, I can say with 99% certainty, Skarbrand would have killed Mortarion. So that was a major, major strategic mess up to forget about that stratagem and to forget to do that, because Mortarion survived so much longer than he should have, and he killed Skarbrand in the next fight phase, in the Death Guard fight phase. That's partially why I didn't have any of the Death Guard units charge in Death Guard turn 2 assault phase, was so that the only units fighting would have been units already locked in combat, which in this instance would have only been Mortarion, Skarbrand, and one of the Bloodletter squads, which was down to around half strength, I believe. But because no one charged, the only people fighting were those that were already locked in combat, and since it was the Death Guard turn, Mortarion was guaranteed the ability to fight first in that assault phase. Had someone charged in, that unit would have gone first, and then the Chaos Demons of Khorne could have used the stratagem that Mortarion used the previous assault phase, so then Skarbrand could attack next before Mortarion would get to attack. So that's partially why, from a strategic standpoint, I didn't have any of the Death Guard units charge in, was so that Mortarion would be guaranteed to fight. And of course, he killed off Skarbrand with a bunch of his wounds left, and he was almost fully healthy at the beginning of Death Guard turn 1. They took a couple wounds off from Smite and stuff like that, but Skarbrand should not have died in Death Guard turn 2 fight phase. Skarbrand should have killed Mortarion and then should have been able to move across the board freely, which would have freed up the Fleshhounds from having to go finish off Mortarion, so that they could have gone and engaged the Plague Marines or the Land Raider, the Plague Burst Crawler, something else. But they sort of had to go out of their way to help the final Bloodletter, which of course died when Mortarion blew up at the end. The Fleshhounds had to go finish off Mortarion, and they shouldn't have had to do that. So the one big strategic mistake that I would say I made in this game on either side was not using the stratagem Frenetic Bloodlust in order to give Skarbrand a chance to kill off Mortarion, because I think that completely changed the course of the game at that point. I thought at that point when Mortarion survived and then the next fight phase he finished off Scarbrand, I thought the Death Guard had that game in the bag. At least it looked like it. They still had the Land Raider with everyone inside of it. They still had the Plagueburst Crawler with 11 out of its 12 starting wounds. Mortarion was still alive and causing Chaos Demon of Khorne units to have to target and focus on him rather than other units. Now, of course, the next Chaos turn, everything else changed. They finished off Mortarion. The Demon Prince moved up and took out the Land Raider. And the Land Raider being taken out ended up killing off 4 Plague Marines with Bubotic Axes, which I did not expect to see happening. And then, of course, they failed their morale check and lost another guy with a Flail of Corruption. So the game ended up balancing itself out, but the game should have been far more in Khorne's favor after seeing the dice rolls and what happened throughout this battle report. The game looked a lot closer than it really should have been. Now, of course, it ended up with a 7-point swing. 22 points, victory points versus 15, so that doesn't look very close, but throughout most of the battle, it looked very close. I mean, we had at one point 3 victory points to 2 showing, then it was like 5 to 3 or something, then it was 6 to 5 or something like that. But it looked like it was staying fairly close, and it really shouldn't have looked that way. The battle should have been, with how everything happened in the beginning, especially if Mortarion was killed off turn 1, the game should have looked far more in Khorne's favor than it did for Death Guard. Now, I'm not saying it was bad that it looked close. In fact, it was more fun since it was close and looked like it was anyone's game, and it really didn't, Khorne didn't actually pull away until the end, killing off a couple extra units, getting some very favorable tactical objective cards at the end, especially with both sides holding on to overwhelming firepower for so long just because they couldn't actually kill off a unit in the shooting phase. Neither side was able to do that very quickly, which I found surprising, especially considering how much shooting firepower Death Guard brought. I mean, they had a Land Raider with 2 Twin Blast Cannons. They had a Plagueburst Crawler with all sorts of stuff. Shouldn't have been as big of a challenge for Death Guard. But so I wanted to bring that up before everyone talks about it in the comments, because I know that's what's going to happen. So yes, I realized that I messed up with not having Scarbrand attack a second time, even though it's not something that's in the stat lines that he has to do. It's simply a stratagem that I have the choice of using, but that definitely would have made strategic sense to use said stratagem. So that was just a mental error on my part. I knew that stratagem existed too. I took a look through the stratagem cards before the battle, so I knew that one existed. I had pulled it out and set it aside so I would remember to use it when the time came up, and then I didn't. So although it's interesting that even after all that and such a big strategic mistake, Khorne still ended up winning by a significant margin, I think partially that just shows how good their dice rolls were towards the end of the game, even with the one Demon Prince of Nurgle surviving for so long against so much, sitting over on objective marker 4, which now a Skull Cannon's sitting on. But, you know, that one Demon Prince should have died a lot sooner than that. And the fact that Khorne lost both of its Bloodthirsters right away, literally without doing anything. Neither Bloodthirster got a single attack, and really, if you think about it, I mean, I know that the one did, but then, of course, after looking at Scarbrand's rules, realized, oh, everyone gets an extra attack characteristic, +1 to their attack characteristic if they're within 8 inches, which includes Mortarion, and because he charged, that attack would have gone through before the Bloodthirster would have gotten any of his attacks off. So it's probably for the best that the Bloodthirster did 0 damage to Mortarion, because any damage that he had to do, or did he do 1 damage? I don't remember, but he did very minimal damage to Mortarion. But even if he had done significant damage, that all would have been wiped out and, you know, had to have been taken off and backtracked, because technically all of Mortarion's attacks go through before the Bloodthirsters. And so even going back and redoing that 1 extra attack that Scarbrand granted him, that all would have happened before any of the Bloodthirsters' attacks. So technically, looking at the battle, if everything had been done in the proper order, both Bloodthirsters did absolutely nothing the entire game. If things had been done in the proper order, both Bloodthirsters would not have even had a chance to attack the entire battle. because both were killed off turn 1, well, before they were supposed to get attacks in. So even with the Bloodthirsters doing nothing, Scarbrand being killed off when he probably shouldn't have been, the fact that Khorne managed to draw enough favorable tactical objectives and also do enough damage with what was left in order to be able to pull out a victory and really almost table the Death Guard. I mean, the Death Guard have 3 Nurgling Swarms left in 1 squad and 1 Tallyman left, and that's it, versus 3 Skull Cannons and 7 Flesh Hounds, one of which is wounded. Like, that's a pretty empty battlefield right there. I mean, we've got I think we have 1 unit in each of the 6 quadrants. Or 6, they wouldn't be called quadrants if there's more than 4 of them, but each of the 6 2-foot by 2-foot sections, there's a single unit in each section. Although I guess the Tallyman is sort of straddling the line, but still, like, there's not much left on this battlefield. And looking at that, the Death Guard would definitely be tabled far before Khorne would be, but still, like, that's the fact that Khorne is down to only 4 out of 11 starting units, and the Death Guard are down to 2 out of 11 starting units. That's pretty amazing, considering we only went through 5 turns. So that's some of my thoughts on the game. I thought the game went pretty well. It was pretty enjoyable to play. It was interesting to see such a close combat heavy army with a little bit of range support face off against a fairly balanced army between Mortarion and the Plague Marines and the Demon Princes being ranged. We got some psychic powers, plenty of shooting. It's a fairly balanced overall army on the Death Guard side, and they got a really good head start on the game too, killing off a Bloodthirster, killing off a second Bloodthirster, Mortarion surviving when he shouldn't have, but they still lost pretty handily at 22-15. So overall, it was pretty good. It was enjoyable. I'm looking forward to the next one, which will be these 2 armies again, but a different mission and a different board, of course, and a different deployment map. So we'll see what the next battle brings. Thanks for watching. Leave your comments down below about things that you would have done differently or things that you would change about the particular armies. I won't be able to change anything about these armies during this group, but I'm always open to suggestions for future battle reports down the road. Still thinking about what the next group after this is even going to bring for the armies, so always looking for suggestions. Hope you liked it. Thanks for watching.